indicating their presence on the electronic voting board. The clerk will close the roll.
Mr. Speaker, a quorum is present.
Pursuant to House Rule 3, I have examined and approved the Journal of the House of Delegates for January 27, 2023. Motions and resolutions under Rule 39, pursuant to the provisions of Rule 40, are now in order. Does the clerk have any announcements or communications?
Mr. Speaker, no announcements or communications. Therefore, in this first portion of the morning hour, pursuant to House Rule 40, members are asked to use the request to speak buttons for those agenda items displayed by reference on the voting board.
The delegate from Scott, Delegate Kilgore.
For an introduction.
The delegate has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the House, today we have a special guest at the front desk who is participating through the Associate Exchange Program sponsored by the American Society of Legislative Clerks and Secretaries. Lacey Ramirez is a reading clerk for the Oregon House of Representatives, and she works for Tim Sakarik, who is the chief clerk in Oregon, as well as the ASLCS president this year. Lacey has been working in their chief clerk's office since 2019. She's here in Richmond for the entire week to observe how our legislature works and perhaps offer ideas and innovations that might improve our processes. In addition to reading bills, she assists the chief clerk with her voting system, which includes the counting of votes, tracking debate, and uploading their daily agenda on the calendar. She also assists with journal proofing and civics education, developing content for their social media accounts. And she is the current chair for the ASLCS Technology Committee. Finally, Mr. Speaker, Lacey is here this week with her 2.5-year-old daughter, Roselia, and her mother. Lacey is of indigenous Mexican descent and is fluent in Spanish. I ask everyone to extend a warm Virginia welcome to Lacey this week, and please give her a warm welcome.
The delegate from Richmond City, Delegate McQuinn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise for a motion.
The delegate has the floor.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to call out of order resolution on H.R. 270 on page 52.
The clerk will report a resolution.
House Resolution number 270 on page 42 of today's calendar, H.R. 270, commending the Boys and Girls Clubs in Virginia.
The delegate from Richmond City.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move the adoption of the resolution.
Were you planning on speaking to it also?
Yes. So you
all right,
want me to speak?
I'll
okay, thank you. And just very briefly, so it's, my seatmate, Delegate Ward, so elegantly shared last week about the Boys and Girls Club. And we have Mr. Sean Miller, who's here, the interim president and CEO of the Metro Richmond Boys and Girls Club today. And so, again, we just commend them for all the great work that they do to aspire and to just help young people to reach their higher level of personal development and to become a good and productive citizen in our society. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I move the adoption of the resolution.
The question is on adoption of House Resolution 270. As many as favor that motion will say aye. Those opposed, no. The resolution is adopted.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Congratulations.
Speaker, we ask that my colleagues would give them a round of applause for the great work that they do. Thank
you. The delegate from Rockingham, Delegate Runyon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise for an introduction.
The delegate has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members of the body, today's invitation was offered by my dear friend, Dr. John Sloop. Dr. Sloop was born in Brazil to missionary parents, and he graduated from Belhaven University and Columbia Theological Seminary. He served in the Lithonia Presbyterian Church in the suburb of Atlanta before being called to serve at First Presbyterian Church on Court Square in Harrisonburg for 27 years. In retirement now, Dr. Sloop enjoys his 11 grandchildren and great-grandson. He's an avid reader, enjoys a good cigar with friends. I hope that we will all share our appreciation with him and our blessing of our time together in Jefferson's capital. Thank you, Dr. Sloop.
The delegate from Prince William, Delegate Munden King.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise for the purpose of an introduction.
The delegate has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, today we have joining us from Prince William County, the Jack and Jill of America, which is a membership-based organization of mothers with children ages 2 to 19 who are dedicated to nurturing future leaders by strengthening their children through leadership development, volunteer service, and philanthropic giving. Today, these amazing and brilliant students are here to speak with us about food and nutrition and lunch accessibility for their classmates. They've joined us and met with many members, including the speaker himself, to talk about how our government works and how to advocate for the things they care about. So I ask my colleagues to join me in giving them a warm welcome to the House of Delegates.
The delegate from Hampton, Delegate Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise for an introduction.
The delegate has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the House, in the gallery today, we have members of the Virginia AFL-CIO. You all have probably seen them throughout this day lobbying on issues that are important to them, such as bills that would enable workers to negotiate for higher wages and benefits and improve their working conditions in the workplace. There are millions of union members in America, all of them from different walks of life. They are firefighters, shipbuilders, electricians, letter carrier, postal workers, longshoremen, painters, carpenters, and teachers. And don't forget, NFL players are also unionized. You know, they know what they are, that working together, they can get more done than just working all by themselves. And some of you already know that I'm a union member. I'm president of a teachers union. You probably wonder, why in the world is she so dead set on unions? And let me tell you why. You know, and I'm going to be real quick. I've told you about my father. Small man in stature, but the biggest man I've ever seen in my life. And he told us one day, he came to us and said, you know why I joined that union? I was sweet at that time, and we said, why, Daddy? And he said, because, this is during Jim Crow, they got to pay me the same thing that they pay any white man. And he said, you know why? And I said, why, Daddy? Because it says so right here in my union contract. My daddy lived and died by that union contract, and it made the difference in our lives. Right now, my father's been gone for about 30 years, and she's still living in that house that my daddy paid for with his union wages, and right now, she is still living on his union pension. So this is the reason why I am so pro-labor. I don't know the reason for everybody else, but here they are. Please give them a very warm welcome, all the men and women of the Virginia AFL-CIO.
The delegate from Virginia Beach, Delegate Greenhall.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise for the purpose of an introduction.
The delegate has the floor.
I am honored today to be able to introduce Idaho State Representative Barbara Ehart. I ask if she would just come over here to the center aisle. Thank you. Representative Ehart, after playing Division I women's hoops at Idaho State, she spent 15 years coaching Division I women's basketball at 4 institutions, including UC Santa Barbara, BYU, Washington State, and as head coach at Cal State Fullerton. Representative Ehart was the first legislator to bring forward and pass the Fairness in Women's Sports Act, which protects opportunities for girls and women in sports. I ask you to join me in giving the representative a warm house welcome.
The delegate from Chesterfield, Delegate Coiner.
Mr. Speaker, I have an announcement.
The delegate has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, as co-chair of the Arts Caucus, I am excited to share the news that one of my local high schools, Thomasdale High School Specialty Center for the Arts, has covered 4th floor West Wing and 94 pieces of student artwork. So we had a great event last week of the Arts Caucus and would encourage members to stop by and see the local art that's hanging in 4th floor West's Hall. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The delegate from Portsmouth, Delegate Scott.
Mr. Speaker, I rise for a motion.
The delegate will state it.
Mr. Speaker, I ask that when the body adjourns today, we do so in the memory and honor of Mr. Tyree Nichols, and I'd like to speak to that motion.
The delegate has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm sure many of you have heard, if not seen, the horrific video of the beating of Tyree Nichols by law enforcement in Memphis, Tennessee. Mr. Nichols was a father, a skateboarder, an avid photographer, Delegate Hayes, an aspiring professional photographer, and he was a working man every day working at FedEx in Memphis. I could write a book about the devastation that millions of black folks, including myself, experience in moments like these. But I came to this work over 30 years ago, not to write books, but to fight. And I'm here fighting for Mr. Tyree Nichols, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and all of us that have become victims to centuries of systemic and structural racism. Now, I know what's on everybody's mind. I watched the video. But he was killed by black cops, Don. Doesn't that make this different? And the answer is no. No. These black officers' roles, responsibilities, and expectations were set by the very system designed for them to fail. Increasing representation and having more black and brown officers has always been our goal. But it's superficial if they're still being taught the same tactics and being led by the same beliefs that got us to this point. We need a systemic change in the approach to law enforcement because what we are witnessing is the effects of a fixed system, not just the individuals in that system. When I was a young law student in '92, after the Rodney King verdict, I led protests on the campus of LSU Law School. Similar to the same thing that's seeing the same type of horrific beating that was given at that time. It's still happening. Our communities are still being traumatized, having to view this as normal. The gentleman from Prince William County introduced and passed House Bill 1250 in 2020, banning bias-based police profiling. The bill also required that every law enforcement officer report the race of every person they stop and every record of excessive force complaint into a community policing database. We also asked that Community Policing Act to give us the data of who was being stopped and why. The Community Policing Act is working. That policy and many other bipartisan bills that we have passed are working. And we could be doing a disservice to the people of the Commonwealth by halting this progress. Mr. Speaker, I've witnessed this body make real progress. The Community Policing Act was voted favorably with a broad base of support. Our current Attorney General, J.C. Meares, he voted for this bill, Mr. Speaker. Gentleman from Fauquier, he voted for this bill, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Chair Senior Chairman from Appropriations for Virginia Beach, he voted for this bill. These are the types of bipartisan solutions that can make a real difference. Community policing should not be Democrat versus Republican. Safety and accountability can go hand in hand. And it's bipartisan, Mr. Speaker. We've done this before, and I know we can do it again. House Democrats want to work to find creative solutions to address these challenges. Now, while some want to go backwards and take us back to the days when we didn't have a statewide database, they want to reinstate chokeholds. They want to reinstate no-knock warrants, all of the things that we got rid of together. And I know this is an election year, so some folk have to try to roll back that progress. But I'd ask us not to do that. Take this opportunity and go back and watch that video of this young man yelling for his mother while he was being beat to death by people he thought were sworn to protect him. And when you take your votes to repeal these type of community policing acts, think about that cry. And I say this not to put down any member of this body, because I know that there are many who want us to work in good faith on these issues. But we need to continue the course that we're going on towards police reform. We can do it together. And here's a quote from the gentleman from Prince William when he passed this bill some years ago, and it stuck in my mind. He was shocked when I called him to tell him I needed to make sure I had it right. And the delegate from Prince William said, quote, "White Americans wake up each day expecting the American dream to work for them. Black Americans wake up each day hoping that we get access to the American dream. There's an enormous bridge between expectation and hope," unquote. Mr. Speaker, that quote has stuck with me since I've been here. And today I'm that same headstrong leader that was protesting back at LSU, working to push this collective body towards justice. But dare I say, there are some who want us to go backwards, and we can't have it. We need access to resources. We need the chance to be seen and to feel safe around law enforcement. I've never felt safe around law enforcement in my entire life. I've always been worried, what are they thinking? Do they see me as a suspect? Are they going to hurt me? I want to feel safe. I know we have some very professional law enforcement, and I know there are some in law enforcement that are very professional, and most of them are, the vast majority. But it's only a few bad apples, they say, Don. How many bad apples do you want landing your airplane? How many is acceptable? None. So I'll say this, Mr. Speaker. Only together can we bridge the gap between expectation and hope. Only together. I'm asking that all of my colleagues, when we adjourn today, would adjourn in the memory and honor, and hopefully the last time we have to do it for this type of circumstances, of Tyree Nichols. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The delegate from Portsmouth, Delegate Scott, moves that when the House adjourned today, it adjourn in the honor and memory of Tyree Nichols. As many as favor that motion will please rise. The motion is agreed to. The delegate from Prince William, Delegate Maldonado.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise for the purpose of an announcement.
The delegate has the floor.
Just want to remind everyone today that the Technology and Innovation Caucus has a meeting at 4 p.m. It will be in Pocahontas 300B conference room. And this is the beginning of the education around our cryptocurrency, digital assets, and blockchain. So it's Blockchain 101. As we have more and more bills come before us in the digital and technology spaces, the T&I Caucus hopes to help educate each of us to make sure we're voting and drafting in an informed way. Hope you'll join us. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The clerk shall announce the next order of business.
Mr. Speaker, the second portion of the morning hour reserve member request for legislation to move from the uncontested to a regular calendar. There's only one in the category, a large category, House Bill's second reading uncontested calendar, page 25 of the printed version. Delegate Wiley's House Bill 2362 is out of the block and over to the regular calendar.
The clerk will announce the next order.
Third portion of the morning hour reserve member request for legislation to go by for the day, if any. Subsequent motion by the majority leader. There are several. First category is House Bill second reading regular, page 28 of the printed calendar. Delegate Davis's House Bill 1810, go by for the day. Same category, moving forward to page 36, Delegate Ranson's House Bill 2264 is by for the day. And in the memorial resolution block, page 39, Delegate Waxman's House Joint Resolution 583 has been requested to go by for the day.
Delegate from Scott, Delegate Kilgore.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the legislation as announced by the clerk go by for the day.
Delegate from Scott, Delegate Kilgore moves that the legislation as announced by the clerk go by for the day. As many as favor that motion will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The motion is agreed to. The clerk shall announce the next order.
And the fourth and final portion of the morning hour reserved for member requests for points of personal privilege.
The clerk will call the calendar.
Calendar for today, Monday, January 30th, 2023. First category, House bills on third reading uncontested calendar. Approximately 30 bills in the third reading uncontested calendar block, beginning on page 1, House Bill 1514. Turn to page 2, House Bills 1366, 1376, 1418, 1433, 1447, 1449. Turn to page 4, continuing with the third reading uncontested block, House Bills 1457, 1471, 1490, 1542, 1587, 1610. Turning to page 6, continuing with the block, House Bills 1627, 1633, 1638, 1659, 1709, 1725. Turn to page 8, continuing House Bills third reading uncontested, the large uncontested calendar block, House Bills 1735, 1737, 1840, 1918, 1932, 2014. Turn to page 10. Continuing with the block, House Bill 2080, 2133, 2190, House Bill 2199, House Bill 2246, and Mr. Speaker, rounding out the third reading uncontested calendar block, bottom of page 11, is House Bill 2256.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker.
The delegate from Scott, Delegate Kilgore.
Would I understand, Mr. Speaker, parliamentary inquiry?
The delegate will state it.
Would I understand that this is the final vote on these bills?
They're here. They're back.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So it is the final vote.
It is. Thank you, Delegate. Shall the bills pass? The clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 100, no 0.
Ayes 100, no 0. The bills pass.
Continuing with today's calendar, next category is House bills on third reading regular, House bills third reading regular. 7 bills in this category, top of page 12. First up is House Bill 1545, relating to Special Conservators of the Peace, Dinwiddie Airport and Industrial Authority.
Shall the bill pass? The clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 72, noes 27.
Ayes 72, noes 27. The bill passes.
Next up, House Bill 1569, relating to the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, disclosure of personnel records.
Shall the bill pass? The clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 63, noes 37.
Ayes 63, noes 37. The bill passes.
House Bill 1602, relating to State Plan for Medical Assistance Services, telemedicine, in-state preference.
Shall the bill pass? The clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 100, no 0.
Ayes 100, no 0. The bill passes.
Turn to page 13. House Bill 1622 is a bill relating to health regulatory boards, delegation of authority to conduct informal fact-finding proceedings.
Shall the bill pass? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 82, noes 17.
Ayes 82, noes 17. The bill passes.
House Bill 1702, relating to the Virginia Residential Landlord and Tenant Act, terms and conditions of rental agreement, rent increase notice.
Shall the bill pass? The clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 58, noes 42.
Ayes 58, noes 42. The bill passes.
House Bill 2251, directing the Virginia Department of Health Professions to convene a work group to provide recommendations related to regulations on changes to licensure requirements of dentists and dental hygienists to enhance access to quality dental care. Report.
Shall the bill pass? The clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 100, noes 0.
Ayes 100, noes 0. The bill passes.
And turning to top of page 14, last bill in this category, House Bill's third reading regular, House Bill 2347, relating to the Department of Planning and Budget Regulatory Budget Program report.
Shall the bill pass? The clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 53, noes 47.
Ayes 53, noes 47. The bill passes.
Yep. Continuing with the calendar, House bills on second reading uncontested calendar, approximately 30 bills in the second reading uncontested calendar block. Beginning middle of page 14 in the printed version, House Bill 2201, which seeks to amend and reenact Section Code of Virginia relating to association health plans, prohibiting discrimination based on health status, base premium rates. The bill is brought to the Committee on Commerce and Energy with an amendment in nature as substitute.
The delegate from Bedford, Delegate Byron.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 2201 is on behalf of the Hotel, Lodging, and Restaurant Association and provides that association health plans, a carrier can establish base premium rates formed on an actuarially sound, modified community rating methodology that considers the pooling of all participant claims. This will enable them to offer insurance to their members. I hope it will be the pleasure of the House to engross the bill and pass it on to its third reading.
Shall the committee substitute be agreed to? All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The substitute's agreed to.
Continuing with the block, House Bill 1419 seeks to amend and reenact Section Code of Virginia relating to the Brown versus Board of Education Scholarship Program extension of eligibility. The bill is reported to the Committee on Education.
The delegate from Fairfax, Delegate Corey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill speaks for itself. This is a scholarship fund for those whose education was adversely affected by the Great Resistance, by massive resistance, by having, but it was great too, by having their schools closed. And right now in the code, we do have such a scholarship fund for the individuals directly affected. There's $1 million unspent in that scholarship fund, and this bill would allow lineal descendants of the person who is directly affected to access those scholarship funds. I move that you engross the bill and pass it on third reading.
Continuing, House Bill second reading uncontested calendar, top of page 15, House Bill 1421 seeks to amend and reenact Section Code of Virginia relating to the Virginia Breeders Fund, disbursements to certain breeders and owners of horses. The bill is brought to the Committee on Agriculture, Chesapeake, and Natural Resources.
The delegate from Fauquier, Delegate Weber.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, HB 1421 merely expands the payouts from just first place from the Virginia Breeders Fund to also include second and third. I ask that the House engross the bill and pass it on to its third reading.
Next up is House Bill 1436, which seeks to amend and reenact section of the Code of Virginia relating to income tax subtraction, military benefits, age restriction. The bill is before the Committee on Finance.
The delegate from Goochland, Delegate McGuire.
Mr. Speaker, House Bill 1436 simply allows all qualified military retirees to receive a tax benefit regardless of age, and I ask that this body engross the bill and pass it on to its third reading.
House Bill 1470 is a bill to amend and reenact 3 sections of the Code of Virginia relating to real property tax, exemption for disabled veterans and surviving spouses. The bill is before the Committee on Finance.
The delegate from Fairfax, Delegate Watts.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 1470 clarifies that there is the statute of limitations as far as applying for the constitutional exemption of real estate property for 100% disabled veterans and their surviving spouse goes to the 2011 when the constitutional amendment was passed and has been affirmed statutorily in several acts since. I hope it will be the pleasure of the body to pass the bill and pass it on to third reading.
Turn to page 16 of the calendar, continuing with the block, House Bill 1486. It is a bill to amend and reenact a section of the Code of Virginia relating to personal property tax farm equipment. Bill supports Committee on Finance with amendments.
The delegate from Fauquier, Delegate Weber.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, 1486 expands and updates the list of farm machinery and farm implements that are eligible for exemption from a locality's personal property tax. Those 4 things that we do are vehicles primarily used for agricultural purposes, private trailers used primarily for agricultural purposes, hoop houses, and certain equipment in nurseries. I ask that the bill be engrossed and moved on to its third reading.
Shall the committee amendments be agreed to? All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The amendments are agreed to.
Turn to page 17. House Bill 1496 is a bill to amend and reenact two sections of the Code of Virginia relating to the Commonwealth Mass Transit Fund. The bill is reported to the Committee on Transportation with a substitute on January 19th, subsequently reported to the Committee on Appropriations.
The delegate from Botetourt, Delegate Austin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move the substitute.
Shall the committee substitute be agreed to? All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The substitute is agreed to. The delegate from Botetourt.
Mr. Speaker, the substitute makes changes to the Commonwealth Mass Transit Fund as it relates to funding and oversight of the Virginia Railway Express and the Washington Metropolitan Area Transit Authority. I ask that the bill be engrossed and passed to its third reading.
House Bill 1555 seeks to amend the Code of Virginia relating to institutions of higher education, human trafficking awareness, and prevention training required. The bill is reported to the Committee on Education.
The delegate from Isle of Wight, Delegate Brewer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 1555 seeks to add human trafficking awareness and training to higher education, so that way students can be aware, prepared, and hopefully prevent instances of human trafficking. I hope it would be the will of the body to engross the bill and pass it on to its third reading.
House Bill 1576 seeks to amend the Code of Virginia relating to school board for the city of Lynchburg, staggered terms in the event of an election. The bill is reported to the Committee on Education.
The delegate from Lynchburg, Delegate Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaking to the bill, this sets the election and structure of the school board of the city of Lynchburg should they transition from appointed to elected school board. Right now, the school board observes an appointed structure that does not align with the standard four-year terms that other local offices observe. I hope it's the will of the body to engross this and pass it on. Thank you.
Continuing with the uncontested second reading block, top of page 18, House Bill 1577 is before the body now. It seeks to amend and reenact Section Code of Virginia relating to rabid animals, quarantine, access by the Department of Health. The bill is reported to the Committee on Agriculture, Chesapeake Natural Resources with amendments.
The delegate from Sussex, Delegate Waxman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to move the amendment.
Shall the committee amendment be agreed to? All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The amendment is agreed to. The delegate from Sussex.
Mr. Speaker, House Bill 1577 goes to help correct a missing piece of the code in Virginia to allow people from the Public Health Department to actually inspect the animals that are in a quarantine to make sure that they are quarantined properly and that they are not exhibiting signs of rabies to assess the animals. We've had a couple of instances in our county where animal owners refuse to allow that access, and this bill corrects that. I'd like to engross the bill and move it to its third reading.
Next up, Delegate Wright's House Bill 1623, which seeks to amend and reenact several sections of Code of Virginia and repeal others, all relating to the reduction of toxic substances in Virginia waters. The bill's report Committee on Agriculture, Chesapeake, and Natural Resources with amendment H of a substitute.
The delegate from Lunenburg, Delegate Wright.
Mr. Speaker, I'll move the substitute.
Shall the committee's substitute be agreed to? All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The substitute is agreed to. The delegate from Lunenburg.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, with the substitute, HB 1623 is a bill that increases government efficiency by eliminating 3 reports that DEQ is required to submit. They will still have the information online. They just will not be required to go through the work of publishing them. The redundant reports that this bill eliminates are the Eastern Virginia Groundwater Management Advisory Committee report, the Virginia Roanoke River Basin Advisory Committee report, and the DEQ Office of Pollution Prevention Annual Report. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Speaker, this is a common sense government efficiency bill, and I hope it be the pleasure of the body to engross the bill and pass it on to its third reading.
Continuing with the block, House Bill 1685 seeks to amend and reenact 2 sections of the Code of Virginia relating to local business taxes penalties. The bill's reported Committee on Finance with an amendment nature of substitute.
The delegate from Virginia Beach, Delegate Greenhall.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to speak to the bill.
The delegate has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 1685 simply requires localities to notify businesses when unpaid business taxes will begin to accumulate penalty and interest in advance of that penalty and interest beginning to be applied. I ask that the bill be engrossed and passed to its third reading. Thank you.
She didn't.
Sorry. I believe there's a committee substitute. Shall the substitute be agreed to? As many as favor that motion will say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The substitute is agreed to.
Continuing with the uncontested second reading block, bottom of page 19, House Bill 1704 is a bill to amend and reenact sections of the Code of Virginia relating to public elementary and secondary schools, reports of certain arrests and convictions of certain employees, receipt, report, and compilation. Bills report Committee on Education with amendments.
The delegate from Albemarle, Delegate Bell.
Mr. Speaker, I move the committee amendments.
Shall the committee amendments be agreed to? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The amendments are agreed to. The delegate from Albemarle.
Mr. Speaker, members of the body, this bill arose from a case in Fairfax County where a middle school counselor was allowed to continue counseling at his public middle school for some time after his arrest and even after his initial conviction. What it would do is require each division to designate a division safety official, which could be the superintendent or designee. This would be left with the state through the Virginia Center of School and Campus Safety. And then upon an arrest of an employee of a school district, the arresting officer would notify that division safety official. Upon conviction, the clerk would notify the division safety official of any felony conviction. And ultimately, if the probation officer discovered that someone was a teacher, they would notify the division safety official. Hopefully, with the pleasure of the House to engross the bill, pass it on to a third reading.
Turn to page 20, continuing with the block, House Bill 1781 is a bill to amend and reenact 2 sections of the Code of Virginia relating to the Southwest Virginia Energy and Research Development Authority, powers and duties. Department of Energy and Department of Environmental Quality report. The bill is reported for the Committee on Agriculture, Chesapeake, and Natural Resources.
The delegate from Washington, Delegate O'Quinn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 1781 is a bill that further defines the scope and role of the Southwest Virginia Energy R&D Authority. I would move that we engross the bill and pass it to its third reading.
House Bill 1822 seeks to amend and reenact Section Code of Virginia relating to public school employees, offense involving solicitation of sexual molestation, physical or sexual abuse, or rape of a child penalty. The bill is reported to Committee on Education.
The delegate from Stanton, Delegate Avoli.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members of the body, HB 1822 clarifies a loophole in current law for the purpose of protecting children in public schools. Current law prohibits school divisions from hiring or contracting with individuals convicted of violent felonies involving molestation, physical sexual abuse, or rape of a child. HB H22 adds the specification that an individual who has solicited such sex acts shall also be prohibited from employment or contract work for local school divisions. In short, Mr. Speaker, HB 1822 adds solicitation of minors to commit sex acts as a list of offenses that prohibit individuals from working in public schools. I ask at the pleasure of the body to engross the bill and pass it on to third reading. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Top of page 21, continuing with the block. House Bill 1828 is before the body. It's a bill which seeks to authorize the Department of Conservation and Recreation to grant and convey an easement and right-of-way over Neabsco Beach Way at Leesylvania State Park. The bill is before the Committee on Agriculture, Chesapeake, and Natural Resources.
The delegate from Prince William, Delegate Torian.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, House Bill 1828 authorizes the Department of Conservation and Recreation to grant and convey an easement and right-of-way over Neabsco Beach Way at Leesylvania State Park to the Rivermount Corporation. The easement will allow ingress and egress from Daniel K. Lubbock Drive to the Rivermount condominiums via Neabsco Beach Way. I hope it will be the pleasure of the body to engross the bill and pass it on to its third reading.
Neabsco, I apologize. Continuing with the uncontested second reading block, House Bill 1839 seeks to amend and reenact Sections of the Code of Virginia relating to the South Central Wastewater Authority Watershed General Permit for Nutrients. Bill is reported to the Committee on Agriculture, Chesapeake, and Natural Resources with an amendment in nature as substitute.
The delegate from Dinwiddie, Delegate Taylor.
Mr. Speaker, I move the committee substitute.
Shall the substitute be agreed to? All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The substitute is agreed to. The delegate from Dinwiddie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. HB 1839 pertains to the South Central Wastewater Authority. The bill permits the authority to undertake a proposed major construction project to improve its treatment processes in phases instead of one large project. The bill also requires the authority to meet certain project deadlines and to submit periodic progress reports to the Department of Environmental Quality. I ask that the House engross the bill and move it on to its third reading.
Continuing with the block, House Bill 1841 seeks to amend and reenact two sections of the Code of Virginia relating to the Revenue Stabilization Fund and Revenue Reserve Fund required deposits. The bill is before the Committee on Appropriations with amendment.
The delegate from Virginia Beach, Delegate Knight.
Mr. Speaker, I move the amendment.
Shall the committee amendment be agreed to? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The amendment is agreed to. The delegate from Virginia Beach.
Mr. Speaker, House Bill 1841 eliminates the requirement that certain revenues be deposited in the Revenue Stabilization Fund that are in excess of the deposits required by the Constitution of Virginia. I move the bill be engrossed and passed to its third reading.
Turning to page 22, next up, also by Delegate Knight, House Bill 1843, which seeks to create a 6-year capital outlay plan for projects to be funded entirely or partially from general fund-supported resources, and to repeal Chapters 602 and 603 of the Acts of the General Assembly in 2022. The bill is reported to the Committee on Appropriation.
The delegate from Virginia Beach, Delegate Knight.
Mr. Speaker, House Bill 1843 is our 6-year capital outlay plan for large projects that are funded in the next 6 years. I move the bill be engrossed and passed to its third reading.
Next up, House Bill 1887, a bill to amend and reenact sections of the Code of Virginia relating to local school boards and comprehensive community colleges, compensation structure for adjunct instructor, non-credit workforce credentials. The bill is reported to the Committee on Education.
The delegate from Bedford, Delegate Byron.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 1887 encourages local school boards and community colleges to enter into local or regional agreements for establishment and implementation of a competitive compensation structure to recruit and retain adjunct instructors to be jointly compensated by the school boards and colleges to prepare both high school students and college students to earn credit-bearing workforce credentials and non-workforce credentials. I hope it be the pleasure of the House to engross the bill and pass it to a third reading.
Next up is House Bill 1929, which seeks to amend the Code of Virginia relating to educational opportunities for children of certain Foreign Service employees and civilian employees of the Armed Forces of the United States. Those reports the Committee on Education.
The delegate from Stafford, Delegate Durant.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 1929 would allow dependent children of U.S. Foreign Service members. There's currently an exemption for active duty military parents whose children who are serving abroad, and this would expand that to children of U.S. Foreign Service members who are currently serving overseas on government orders to apply for, who are currently in 8th grade and apply for 9th grade admission to Virginia Governor's Schools if the dependents are living with their parents who are currently and will be attending currently attending 8th grade. This exclusion applies when their parents are legal tax-paying and homeowner residents of Virginia while assigned overseas. I hope it's the will of the body to engross this bill and pass it on to its third reading.
Next up in the block, House Bill 1941, which seeks to amend the Code of Virginia related to loans for septic tanks. The bill is reported on Agriculture, Chesapeake, and Natural Resources with amendment nature as substitute.
The delegate from Middlesex, Delegate Hodges.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move the committee substitute.
Shall the committee substitute be agreed to? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The substitute is agreed to. The delegate from Middlesex.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 1941 authorizes the State Water Control Board to provide loans from the Virginia Water Facilities Revolving Loan Fund to a local government for the purpose of repairing septic systems to protect or improve water quality and prevent the pollution of state waters. I hope it will be the pleasure of the body to engross the bill and pass it to its third reading.
Appreciate you voting for your own substitute, 1-0. So we got there together. Yes, sir.
Continuing.
Good practice for everybody else, too. Thank you. Mr. Clerk.
Continuing with the block, Delegate Corey's House Bill 1982 is now before the body. It seeks to amend and reenact sections of the Code of Virginia related to public school principals' parental notification of certain student violations. The bill is reported from the Committee on Education.
The delegate from Fairfax, Delegate Corey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill requires the principal of any public elementary or secondary school or his designee to notify the parents of any student who violates the school board policy or compulsory school attendance requirements when such violation is likely to result in the student's suspension or the filing of a court petition. Current law permits such principals to make such a notification when the violation could result in the student's suspension or the filing of a court petition. This bill makes it a requirement, not optional. I ask that you all engross it and pass it on to the third reading. Thank you.
House Bill 2096, the bill to amend and reenact various sections of the Code of Virginia related to noxious weeds, invasive plant species. The bill is reported to the Committee on Agriculture, Chesapeake, and Natural Resources with amendment nature as substitute.
The delegate from Fairfax, Delegate Bulova.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move the committee substitute.
Shall the committee substitute be agreed to? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The substitute is agreed to. The delegate from Fairfax.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, the purpose of House Bill 2096 is to slow the spread of invasive plant species that cause damage to our ecosystems, forestry, and agriculture. The bill has three main components. The first, it makes sure that Virginia leads by example by prohibiting the propagation or planting of invasive plants on state property except for educational or scientific purposes. Second, it requires landscape contractors to notify customers if they propose to use an invasive plant in a landscape plan. And then third, it helps the farming community to address a longstanding issue by not requiring a permit for the incidental movement of noxious weeds that are already beyond eradication. Mr. Speaker, I move that we engross the bill and pass it on to its third reading.
Turn to page 24 of the printed calendar, continuing with House Bill's second reading uncontested calendar block. House Bill 2181 is a bill to amend and reenact the Section Code of Virginia relating to use of subaqueous beds, non-tidal waters, permits requirement, penalty. The bill is reported to the Committee on Agriculture, Chesapeake, and Natural Resources, Mr. Speaker, with amendments.
The delegate from Tazewell, Delegate Moorfield.
Mr. Speaker, I move to adopt the committee amendment.
Shall the committee amendments be agreed to? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The amendments are agreed to. The delegate from Tazewell.
Mr. Speaker, members of the House, House Bill 2181 eliminates the requirement to obtain a permit from VMRC for activities in non-tidal waters and will require those permits be issued by DEQ. Currently, both VMRC and DEQ are required to issue permits, which is resulting in duplicative activities. I move to engross the bill.
House Bill 2225 is a measure which seeks to amend and reenact section of the Code of Virginia relating to certain student assessment results availability. The bill is reported to the Committee on Education.
The delegate from James City County, Delegate Batten.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 2255 codifies that Virginia's school boards must provide timely access to students' scores on state-administered tests such as the SOL. This is the current practice of the Commonwealth, which adheres to federal guidelines and the Every Student Succeeds Act. And this bill just ensures that regardless of any changes that are made at the federal level, Virginia will always provide test scores in a timely manner to administrators, teachers, and parents. I move the bill be engrossed and passed to the third reading.
Continuing with the block, top of page 25 of the printed calendar. Next up is House Bill 2244, patroned by Delegate Cordoza. That bill seeks to amend and reenact Sections of the Code of Virginia related to the Department of Historic Resources appropriations for historical African-American cemeteries and graves. The bill is reported to the Committee on Agriculture, Chesapeake, and Natural Resources with amendment nature substitute.
The delegate from Hampton, Delegate Cordoza.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move the committee substitute.
Shall the committee substitute be agreed to? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The substitute is agreed to. The delegate from Hampton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill, House Bill 2244, simply ensures that anyone who lived before 1900 and or was interned before 1948 will have their graves protected by the HR. I ask that this bill be moved to its engrossed and moved to its third and final reading.
Continuing with the block, House Bill 2285 seeks to authorize the Department of Conservation and Recreation to grant and convey an easement at Shenandoah River State Park. The bill is reported to the Committee on Agriculture, Chesapeake, and Natural Resources.
The delegate from Winchester, Delegate Wiley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For House Bill 2285, the Department of Conservation and Recreation is requesting to convey an ingress-egress easement to provide access to two neighboring parcels owned by a single landowner adjacent to Shenandoah River State Park at the end of Thunderbird Road, Route 737. Request that the bill gets engrossed and passed on its third reading. Thank you.
House Bill 2362 has been removed to block over to the regular calendar. Therefore, continuing with the second reading uncontested calendar block, top of page 26. Next up, House Bill 2375, which seeks to amend and reenact Sections of the Code of Virginia related to provisional teacher licensure, permissive extension, satisfactory performance evaluations during years of actual employment. Bill is reported to the Committee on Education.
The delegate from Prince William, Delegate Sewell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 2375 will aid in addressing the current teacher shortage that we are experiencing here in the Commonwealth by permitting the extension of provisional licenses for qualified teachers who, for one reason or another, may not have taught all 3 years under their provisional license, yet received a satisfactory evaluation in the years that they did teach. The Virginia Department of Education estimates that there are as many as 40,000 qualified teachers who are impacted. I hope it is the will of this body to engross the bill and pass it on to its third reading.
And Mr. Speaker, last bill in the uncontested second reading calendar block is House Bill 2393, which seeks to amend the Code of Virginia related to coastal resilience policy, research university collaborative. Bill is reported to the Committee on Agriculture, Chesapeake, and Natural Resources with amendments.
The delegate from Middlesex, Delegate Hodges.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move the committee amendments.
Shall the committee amendments be agreed to? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The amendments are agreed to. The delegate from Middlesex.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 2393 ensures the Secretary of Natural Resources and all relevant agencies have access to the full depth, resources, and expertise of the Commonwealth's universities for coastal flooding and resiliency matters. The bill directs that the Secretary and relevant agencies may utilize research, collaborative expertise, research, and data analysis when setting policy. I hope it will be the pleasure of the body to engross the bill and pass it to its third reading.
Shall the bills be engrossed and passed to their third reading? As many as favor that motion will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The bills are engrossed and passed to their third reading.
Continuing with today's calendar, page 27 of the printed version. Next category before us, House bills on second reading regular calendar, approximately 24 plus bills in the second reading regular calendar. First up is Delegate Batten's House Bill 1910. House Bill 1910 seeks to amend the Code of Virginia relating to absentee voting, unsolicited absentee ballot applications, required information penalty. Bill is reported to the Committee on Privileges and Elections. And Mr. Speaker, the patron, Delegate Batten, has floor amendments which are available online and have been distributed.
The delegate from James City County, Delegate Batten.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As described by the clerk, House Bill 1910, and as explained previously, requires organizations sending unsolicited absentee ballot applications to provide information on how to complete and submit the application, requires that the envelope state the application is not being sent by a government entity, that the forms can only be sent to individuals who have not already requested an application, and that third parties cannot pre-fill the forms with voters' information. What the amendment does is it strikes the word individual or from lines 15, 21, 23, and 25, and what this does is it clarifies that if one individual mails absentee ballot request form to another individual, say a friend, that they do not run afoul of the law. I move adoption of the amendment.
The clerk, so that was the amendment that you were speaking to?
Both.
Yes.
All right. Let's have the clerk report the floor amendments.
Mr. Speaker, the floor amendments offered by Delegate Batten, there are 4 of them. Mr. Speaker, I can read them, but they're also available online and been distributed.
The delegate from Newport News, Delegate Price. Speaking of the floor
speaking to
amendments.
the floor amendments.
The delegate has the floor.
Thank you. I want to thank the patron for being so amenable to working with me on some of the adjustments that were needed, just so individuals don't accidentally get caught up in a misdemeanor. So mark down this day. I ask that my colleagues will support the floor amendments and the bill.
Shall the floor amendments be agreed to? As many as favor that motion will say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The floor amendments are adopted.
Mr. Speaker, I move the bill be engrossed and move to the third reading.
Shall the bill be engrossed and passed to its third reading? As many as favor that motion will say aye. Those opposed, no. The bill is engrossed and passed to its third reading.
Mr. Speaker.
The delegate from Scott, Delegate Kilgore.
House Bill, the next bill, House Bill 2385, go by for the day. Have some amendments.
So that the clerks don't yell at me. I'm gonna do this the right way. Today. Who knows what I'll do tomorrow, right? The question, the motion is that House Bill 2385 go by for the day. As many as favor that motion will say aye. Those opposed, no. The motion is agreed to. Bye for the day.
Mr. Speaker, continuing with second reading regular, bottom of page 27, House Bill 1511. It's a bill that seeks to amend and reenact 2 sections of the Code of Virginia relating to midwifery, administration of medication. Bill is before the Committee on Health, Welfare Institutions, Mr. Speaker, with an amendment.
The delegate from Richmond City, Delegate Adams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. HB 1511 removes administrative barriers preventing midwives from practicing to the full scope of their profession by allowing them to carry and administer medications to patients under their care. This bill will both ensure safety and the well-being of the mother and baby and lower administrative costs required to navigate the current limitations, and I would ask the body to engross the bill and pass it on to its third read.
Shall the committee amendment be agreed to? All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The amendment is agreed to. Shall the bill be engrossed and passed to its third reading? As many as favor that motion will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The bill is engrossed and passed to its third reading.
Top of page 28 of the printed calendar, House Bill 1810 has been taken by for the day. Therefore, the bill before the body next is House Bill 1934, which seeks to amend and reenact Section of the Code of Virginia relating to the Administrative Process Act, certain regulations to require legislative approval. The bill is reported to the Committee on General Laws. And, Mr. Speaker, there is a floor amendment by the bill's patron to House Bill 1934 as well.
The delegate from Hanover, Delegate Fowler, why don't you describe the bill first, and then we'll take up the floor amendment.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Again, House Bill 1934, the purpose of this legislation, Mr. Speaker, is to enhance the process by which the General Assembly evaluates and reviews regulations in the Commonwealth. Overregulation can slow economic growth, hurt job prospects for low-income Virginians, and lead to higher consumer prices. Currently, the Commonwealth has over 145,000 regulatory restrictions in its administrative code, which is above the national average. This legislation is designed to help control that, Mr. Speaker. What it does is very simple. It requires the legislature to take a closer look at the rules that will cost $500,000 in their first 5 years of implementation. This new process is modeled after part of what is called the REINS Act, or regulations by the executive in need of scrutiny. The goal is to simply take a closer look specifically at high-cost rules. Mr. Speaker, red, blue, and purple states have implemented this kind of idea from Florida to Colorado to Maine to Wisconsin. Currently, the Legislative Rule Committee can make recommendations to the Assembly that the rule be repealed. Under House Bill 1934, the Legislative Rule Committee would merely be required to issue an opinion on high-cost rules. Again, this is a small change in process, but will lead to more transparency and oversight in regulations, Mr. Speaker.
Let's take up the floor amendment then.
Okay,
could you explain the floor amendment?
Yep, the floor amendment is simply, it is right at the very end of the bill, and what this amendment does, it removes the final sentence, which will avoid constitutional issues and ensure that any legislation to overturn a regulation follows the traditional legislative process. As amended, the bill would still require the Joint Commission on Administrative Rules to report on economically significant regulations to give the General Assembly the information it needs in deciding whether to overturn certain regulations, Mr. Speaker.
The question is on adoption of the patron's floor amendment. As many as favor adoption will say aye. Those opposed, no. The floor amendment is adopted.
All right, Mr. Speaker, it's my hope that the body will engross the bill and pass it on to its third reading.
Shall the bill be engrossed and passed to its third reading? As many as favor that motion will say aye. Those opposed, no. The bill is engrossed and passed to its third reading.
House Bill 2274 is a bill to amend and reenact sections of the Code of Virginia relating to pharmacists' scope of practice, initiation of treatment for certain diseases and conditions. The bill is reported to the Committee on Health, Welfare, and Institutions. Mr. Speaker, with amendments.
The delegate from Scott, Delegate Kilgore.
Mr. Speaker, I move that we adopt the committee amendments.
Shall the committee amendments be agreed to? All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The committee amendments are agreed to. The delegate from Scott, Delegate
Mr. Speaker,
Kilgore.
House Bill 2274 is to support, treat, and test, treat, and test, refer for pharmacists. It allows pharmacists to treat, test, and treat for flu, Group A strep, COVID-19, and UTIs. Mr. Speaker, I hope it be the pleasure of the House to engross the bill and pass it on to its third reading.
Shall the bill be engrossed and passed to its third reading? As many as favor that motion will say aye. Those opposed, no. The bill is engrossed and passed to its third reading.
Turn to page 29. Next up, House Bill 2284. It seeks to amend and reenact sections of the Code of Virginia relating to the Board for Waterworks and Wastewater Works operators, as well as the on-site sewage system professionals membership. The bill is reported to the Committee on Health, Welfare, and Institutions.
The delegate from Winchester, Delegate Wiley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. HB 2284, the purpose of the legislation is to remove the faculty member of a public institution of higher education in the Commonwealth whose principal field of teaching is management or operation of wastewater works or waterworks, and replace with a local or regional representative of the Virginia Department of Health to the board that would provide additional perspective related to the operators and on-site sewage system professionals licensed here and practice. Request this bill be engrossed and passed on to its third reading. Thank you.
Shall the bill be engrossed and passed to its third reading? As many as favor that motion will say aye. Those opposed, no. The bill is engrossed and passed to its third reading.
Next up, House Bill 1573 seeks to direct the Department of Health Professions to amend language related to mental health conditions and impairment in licensure, certification, and registration applications. Bill has an emergency clause on it. It was reported to the Committee on Health, Welfare, Institutions, and the bill's patron, Delegate Walker, also has technical floor amendments that are available and have been distributed.
The delegate from Lynchburg, Delegate Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaking to the bill, 1573 directs the Department of Health Professions to amend questions regarding mental health on the applications for licensure, registration, and certification to be more in line with the modern approaches to mental health.
Let's do the floor amendments now. Tell us what they do.
Okay. Mr. Speaker, there's a minor floor amendment. The amendment correctly identifies that each health regulatory board develops their own application, not the Department of Health Professions as a whole. That's a technical amendment, Mr. Speaker.
All right. Shall the floor amendment be agreed to? All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The amendments are agreed to. Delegate from Lynchburg, Delegate Walker.
Mr. Speaker, I hope it's the will of the body to pass this bill on and engross it to the next reading. Thank you.
Shall the bill be engrossed and passed to its third reading? As many as favor that motion will say aye. Those opposed, no. The bill is engrossed and passed to its third reading.
Turning to page 30 of the printed calendar, House Bill 2354 seeks to amend and reenact sections of the Code of Virginia relating to healthcare provider panels, continuity of care. The bill is reported to the Committee on Commerce and Energy with amendment nature substitute. And Mr. Speaker, the bill's patron, Delegate Orrock, also has a floor amendments that are drawn to that substitute.
The delegate from Spotsylvania, Delegate Orrock.
Mr. Speaker, I move the adoption of the substitute.
You're okay for now? Okay. Didn't know which part he was going to get in on here. So the question is on adoption of the committee substitute. As many as favor that motion will say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The substitute is agreed to. The delegate from Spotsylvania.
And Mr. Speaker, I move the adoption of the floor amendments. What they do is clarify that the patient does not have to proactively request additional coverage and that it will continue for the full term of treatment.
The delegate from Fairfax, Delegate Simon.
Mr. Speaker, speaking to the floor amendments.
The delegate has the floor.
And maybe this is something we can fix just by taking this by temporarily really quickly. I was just looking at these and they seem harmless and technical, but I would note that line 88, so Amendment 2 on line 88 says to strike without any limitation, but the text on line 88 actually says without any time limitation. So it seems like the floor amendment is just missing the word time. Or am I looking in the wrong spot?
The delegate from Spotsylvania.
Mr. Chairman, I would, Mr. Speaker, I would say to the gentleman, there are two floor amendments. The first on line 88 takes out at the enrollee's option after shall, and then after continue, we were meant to take out without any time limitation, so that it now would read, such admission and treatment shall continue until the enrollee is discharged from the inpatient facility.
The delegate from Fairfax.
Mr. Speaker, it maybe doesn't matter. I'm just being pedantic, but the language doesn't say without any time limitation. You just missed a word in what's being struck. There should be an extra word that should also be stricken in the language of the...
If that could go by temporarily, then, Mr. Speaker.
By temporarily, without objection.
Mr. Speaker, continuing, also Delegate Oroch's House Bill 1446. It's a bill to amend and reenact several sections of the Code of Virginia relating to minimum staffing standards for certified nursing facilities, administrative sanctions. The bill was reported from the Committee on Health Care Institutions with Amendment Nature Substitute January 17th. It was subsequently reported to the Committee on Appropriations with a different substitute.
The delegate from Spotsylvania, Delegate Oroch.
Mr. Speaker, am I correct? Procedurally, we will need to reject the HWI substitute and then vote to act on the appropriation. So, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Speaker, I'd move that we accept the HWI committee substitute and ask the body to vote no on that motion.
Shall the HWI committee substitute be agreed to? As many as favor that motion will say aye. Those opposed, no. No. The substitute is rejected. The delegate from Spotsylvania.
Mr. Speaker, I would now move that we adopt the Appropriations Committee substitute.
Shall the Appropriations Committee substitute be agreed to? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The substitute is agreed to.
Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the House, throughout my tenure here, I don't know of any particular issue that has consumed more time of the Health Committee. Members who've been on that committee, and particularly Delegate Watts, can tell you there's at least a 20-year history of attempts to try and address nursing home staffing ratios. The reason it has not proceeded is an incredibly complex problem. You've got to look at workforce. You've got to look at, is there training available to give you the workforce? You've got to look at acuity standards within the facilities. You've got to look at affordability. It's incredibly complex. And, Ms. Speaker, over the last several years, and particularly this last year, I've tried to work earnestly with the industry and the various other stakeholders and proponents to find a means whereby we can at least find a path forward. I think advocates for this bill would tell you it is not as much as they would like, but it is far more than anything we've ever had in the past. The measure you have before you is an incentive-based approach to establishing minimum nursing home staffing ratios based on a minimum number of patient contact hours. This would be the first time you've ever put anything like that in code. It then puts in the provision where noncompliance with those standards will require administrative action with a plan for improvement, and if it is not implemented, granted, some would say over too long a period, but there are some teeth down the line where they will have to comply. The enactment clauses address the necessary flexibility in these standards to address changes in the workforce and the marketplace and other measures beyond our control. It also gives the Department the regulatory authority to implement the provisions and has a delayed effective date of July 1, 2025. Mr. Speaker, I'd be glad to take any questions, but I would move that the bill be engrossed and passed to its third reading.
The delegate from Fairfax, Delegate Watts.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaking to the bill.
The delegate has the floor.
As the delegate from Spotsylvania indicated, it's been a very long journey. And speaking on behalf of the number of advocates who have particularly come forward in the last 2-3 years as COVID really set a harsh spotlight on what was happening in our nursing homes, with over 60% of the population on Medicaid and being one of the few states without any staffing standards.
advocates came forward. Again, with absolute respect for the delegate from Spotsylvania, who again and again over 20 years would look me in the eye and promise, as it was approved and referred to appropriations, that somehow it would get funded. Now, I stand with the advocates who have come forward most recently in their concern about how this will be administered, whether there will be timely action, whether there will be really the on-site experience of what is happening in too many nursing homes. And yet I know year after year after year it has been the budget. We can't have more staffing if we don't have more funding. So the delayed enactment clause is incredibly important in this bill because it says this is now the law, there will be accountability. We aren't just throwing more money at it because it's such a serious problem, but we will have accountability, that there will be minimal staffing standards. Yes, I know many good people and advocates will continue to be pushing for more and more real enforcement that produces results, enforcement that is preventative, that is helpful. But with that, it truly, let me just stop for one personal moment. Again, I honor and pass it on to you all as delegate number 4 and delegate number 2 came into my office before session and said, you know, Vivian, I'd really like you as chief co-patron. That's the kind of partnership that can produce results if we all indeed look at some of these most serious problems and are willing to put the resources as well as the full effect of experienced individuals who will be working with this problem in the years to come. With that, I hope it will be the pleasure of the body to engross this bill and pass it on to third reading.
Shall the bill be engrossed and passed to its third reading? As many as favor that motion will say aye. Those opposed, no. The bill is engrossed and passed to its third reading.
Continuing with House Bill's second reading regular calendar, next up is House Bill 1456. It seeks to amend and reenact 2 sections of the Code of Virginia relating to income tax pass-through entities. The bill is reported to the Committee on Finance with amendment nature substitute.
The delegate from Roanoke, Delegate McNamara.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The House will come to order.
Like to move the substitute.
Shall the committee's substitute be agreed to? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The substitute is agreed to. The delegate from Roanoke.
Thank you. HB 1456 changes the way taxes is administered on pass-through entities. Instead of just all eligible owners will be able to benefit by this tax, even though the entity has certain owners that are not eligible. I ask the bill be engrossed and passed on to its third reading.
Shall the bill be engrossed and passed to its third reading? As many as favor that motion will say aye. Those opposed, no. The bill is engrossed and passed to its third reading.
House Bill 1461 seeks to amend and reenact 2 sections of the Code of Virginia relating to the Department of Education Uniform System of Discipline for Disruptive Student Behavior. The bill is reported to the Committee on Education with amendment nature substitute.
The delegate from Winchester, Delegate Wiley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the committee substitute.
Shall the committee substitute be agreed to? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The substitute is agreed to. Delegate from Winchester.
Thank you. HB 1461 asks the Department of Education to establish and appoint members to a stakeholder work group, including public school teachers and administrators, parents of public school students, and representatives of disability advocacy and autism advocacy organizations to discuss and make recommendations to the Board of Education General Assembly no later than November 1st of this year regarding the feasibility of implementing a uniform system of classroom discipline in public elementary and secondary schools in each local school division in the Commonwealth, whereby a teacher is required to remove a student from a classroom if the student repeats or continues to nonviolent disruptive behavior after the teacher provides 2 warnings to the student, giving due consideration to the need for appropriate exemptions for students with disabilities. Hope it is the will of the body to engross this bill and pass it on to its third reading.
The delegate from Stanton, Delegate Avoli.
Mr. Speaker, speaking to the bill.
The delegate has the floor.
Mr. Speaker and my dear colleagues here, the comments I'm about to make come from the heart. And I am totally amazed as we looked at this bill the other night that we have come to this point in the Commonwealth of Virginia where we have to pass a standard uniform discipline problem or policy. How have we gotten to this point, folks? I'll tell you one thing. I'll look at all of you right here. You sure as heck didn't behave that way when you were in school. I know what happened to me. My mom would give me a whoop ass real big. And you know it. How are we tolerating what's going on? The stories that I hear today, what's going on in public schools, from even at the elementary level, but especially at the high school. Do you realize that when these school doors open every morning, public ed welcomes everyone? We cannot say no to you and you come in, whatever. But boy, there's some challenges there, folks. In a block period of 90 minutes, you have a disruption at the beginning of the period with an unruly student. You realize you've lost that entire 90-minute instructional period, Mr. Speaker? You're not going to get it back. And how many times has that happened during the course of a day, the course of a year? And yet we're holding teachers accountable for standardized testing when the disciplinary procedures are lacking. I'm just appalled that's what's happened. And I ask myself over and over again, how have we gotten to this point? How have we gotten to this point where we in public education today are having to look at a standardized discipline procedure for the entire Commonwealth of Virginia? Is a fight in Virginia Beach not the same fight as I have up in Stanton? Is an unruly student who curses, bullies, the same in Norfolk or in Northern Virginia as it is in Highland County? I would say yes. Where are we? Is it the superintendents of schools? Is it the school boards that have gotten us to this point? The principal, the teacher? And someone had the audacity to tell me that kids have changed. Well, as far as I know, they're still birthed the same way. Expectations have changed, folks. And we may be part of that problem. We, in this room, in this chamber right here. We need to get a hold of this, folks. If not, we're going to have serious problems throughout the United States, our Commonwealth here, and our school divisions. I'm just amazed with a sad, sad heart that I look at this. You know what, folks? I'm not coming here from a Democrat or Republican side here. We need to do something, and quite frankly, I don't know what to do. Maybe this will work. Maybe we should give it a try. I urge you folks, give it a try on a nonpartisan batter and support this bill and see what happens. Let's get these stakeholders together. Let's get the parents, get the administrators, see what we can do. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Shall the bill be engrossed and passed to its third reading? As many as favor that motion will say aye. Those opposed, no. The bill is engrossed and passed to its third reading.
Continuing House Bill, second reading, regular calendar, bottom of page 31. Next up, House Bill 1507. It seeks to amend and reenact sections of the Code of Virginia relating to public elementary and secondary schools' fundamental right of parents. The bill is before Committee on Education with amendment nature as substitute.
The delegate from Goochland, Delegate McGuire.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the committee substitute.
Shall the committee substitute be agreed to? All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The substitute is agreed to. The delegate from Goochland.
House Bill 1507 is a common sense bill that ensures that Virginia school districts are protecting parental rights and are following Virginia fundamental parental rights statute. It simply requires school districts to document how a new or amended policy impacts or doesn't impact Virginia's fundamental parental rights statute. And I'd note that this bill has no impact on school districts that are already applying Virginia's fundamental parental rights statute when amending or adopting policies. It only will impact school districts that have failed to protect our parental rights. So I ask that you engross and pass it on to the third reading.
Shall the bill be engrossed and passed to its third reading? As many as favor that motion will say aye. Those opposed, no. The bill is engrossed and passed to its third reading.
Mr. Speaker, turn to page 32. House Bill 1510 seeks to amend the Code of Virginia relating to local incentives for urban green space. The bill is before the Committee on Finance with an amendment nature substitute.
The delegate from Richmond City, Delegate Adams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the committee substitute.
Shall the committee substitute be agreed to? All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The substitute is agreed to. The delegate from Richmond City, Delegate Adams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. HB 1510 supports urban environmental sustainability by providing localities the authority to ease permitting fees and restrictions in order to encourage the preservation, restoration, or development of urban green space, especially as such efforts substantially reduce urban heating effects, greenhouse gas emissions, or mitigate stormwater drainage issues. And I would ask the body to engross and pass this on to the third reading.
Sorry. Shall the bill be engrossed and passed to its third reading? As many as favor that motion say aye. Those opposed, no. The bill is engrossed and passed to its third reading.
House Bill 1574 seeks to amend and reenact Section of the Code of Virginia relating to local school board selection, referendum on direct election of school board members by voters, authorization by a local governing body. The bill is before the Committee on Education.
The delegate from Lynchburg, Delegate Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaking to the bill.
Delegate has the floor.
HB 1574 seeks to allow the governing body of a county, city, or town to file a petition with the circuit court asking that a referendum be held on the question of whether the members of the school board of the locality shall be elected directly by the voters. This bill does not mandate that localities transition to elected school board. It merely gives another tool in the tool belt of local government to transition, if they desire, through a less burdensome process. I hope it's the will of the body to engross this and pass this on, Mr. Speaker.
Shall the bill be engrossed and passed to its third reading? As many as favor that motion say aye. Those opposed, no. The bill is engrossed and passed to its third reading.
House Bill 1645 seeks to amend and reenact Section of the Code of Virginia relating to litter tax, penalty for failure to pay in a timely manner. The bill was reported to the Committee on Finance with an amendment nature substitute.
The delegate from Virginia Beach, Delegate Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the committee substitute.
Shall the committee substitute be agreed to? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Substitute's agreed to. The delegate from Virginia Beach.
Mr. Speaker, 1645 is, as amended, is a very simple bill. The litter tax is an annual bill that certain businesses pay, and it's unbilled. If you don't pay it by May 1st, or you forget to pay it by May 1st, you get hit with a $100 penalty. 1645 says that before the Department of Tax can assess the $100 penalty, they need to send out a notice for at least 30 days, giving the business owner opportunity to pay. If they don't pay after that, then the standard assessment penalty applies. I move that this bill be engrossed and passed to its third reading.
Shall the bill be engrossed and passed to its third reading? All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The bill is engrossed and passed to its third reading.
Top of page 33, House Bill 1677 seeks to amend and reenact Section of the Code of Virginia relating to retail sales and use tax service exemptions. The bill is reported to the Committee on Finance with amendments.
The delegate from Dinwiddie, Delegate Taylor.
Mr. Speaker, I move the committee amendment.
Shall the committee amendment be agreed to? All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The amendment's agreed to. The delegate from Dinwiddie.
HB 1677 includes clarifying amendments suggested by the Department of Taxation. It clarifies that labor for diagnostic work for car repairs are not taxed, whether or not repairs are performed on the vehicle. I ask the House engross this bill and move it to its third reading.
Shall the bill be engrossed and passed to its third reading? As many as favor that motion say aye. Those opposed, no. The bill is engrossed and passed to its third reading.
House Bill 1691 is a bill to amend and reenact Section of the Code of Virginia relating to School Resource Officer Grants Program and Fund. The bill is reported to the Committee on Education.
The delegate from Virginia Beach, Delegate Greenhall.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 1691 is to expand the use of current funds in the SRO grants program to allow those funds to be used for employment of security and other safety personnel, to be used for training and programming, and also to be used for equipment. I move the bill be engrossed and then passed to its third reading.
Shall the bill be engrossed and passed to its third reading? As many as favor that motion will say aye. Those opposed, no. The bill is engrossed and passed to its third reading.
Turning to page 34, House Bill 1848 is a bill to amend and reenact multiple sections of the Code of Virginia, all relating to stormwater management, streamlining federal conformity. Bill is reported to the Committee on Agriculture, Chesapeake, and Natural Resources, Mr. Speaker, with amendment.
The delegate from Sussex, Delegate Waxman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move the amendments.
Shall the committee amendments be agreed to? All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The amendments are agreed to. The delegate from Sussex.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, House Bill 1858 is a bill designed to help our farmers. What 1848 does is allow farmers to enter an agreement with DEQ at the state level if they want to add to their farm any types of buildings or parking lots or driveways that impacts their tract of land less than 5%. They can enter this agreement with DEQ. Anything over 5%, they're required to go the stormwater with the federal EPA. EPA has agreed to this amendment with the state, and I so move to engross this bill and pass it on to its third and final reading.
Shall the bill be engrossed and passed to its third reading? As many as favor that motion will say aye. Those opposed, no. The bill is engrossed and passed to its third reading.
House Bill 1928 is a bill to amend and reenact Sections Code of Virginia relating to school bus operators training remote online and Spanish language options. The bill is before the Committee on Education, Mr. Speaker, with amendments.
The delegate from Stafford, Delegate Durant.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the committee amendment.
Shall the committee amendment be agreed to? All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. Do you vote aye?
Aye.
The committee amendment is agreed to. The delegate from Stafford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 1928 applies to school bus operators in the training program. This bill requires a school division to include in-person instruction on safety protocols and will allow school districts to the option to offer all or a portion of required school bus classroom instruction in a remote online format as determined by the school division, and allow school district the option for an applicant for employment to receive that instruction for the classroom training in Spanish as determined again by the local school division. The advantages of this bill will afford increased flexibility for participants and trainers as they navigate maybe another job or other time constraints, increase opportunities to measure the learning process, to track their own progress and retake modules for mastery, increased availability for training to learn on demand by accessing the learning platform from any location, and provides the localities with a cost-effective and sustainable measures to save money on classroom materials, meeting spaces, and in hiring additional trainers. I hope it is the will of the body to engross this bill and pass it on to the third reading.
Shall the bill be engrossed and passed to its third reading? As many as favor that motion will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The bill is engrossed and passed to its third reading.
Next up, also patroned by Delegate Duran, House Bill 1942 seeks to amend and reenact Sections of the Code of Virginia relating to real property tax. Notice of rate and assessment changes. The bill is before the Committee on Finance with amendment.
The delegate from Stafford, Delegate Durant.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the committee substitute.
Shall the committee substitute be agreed to? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The substitute's agreed to. The delegate from Stafford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 1942 is a transparency bill. This simply strengthens existing Virginia code that requires the effective rate be calculated when an assessment results in an increase of property value by more than 1%. House Bill 1942 simply requires the effective rate be placed on the reassessment notice. This new rate is then calculated against the new value to show the taxpayer the true impact of the reassessment and later the tax rate. The purpose of a reassessment is not to create a tax windfall for the locality, but to redistribute the tax burden evenly and fairly. That is the sole purpose of Code Section 58.1-3321. This bill provides clarity and transparency to the taxpayer and empowers them with the knowledge of the reassessment process. I hope it is the will of the body to engross this bill and pass it on to the third reading.
Shall the bill be engrossed and passed to its third reading? As many as favor that motion will say aye. Those opposed, no. The bill is engrossed and passed to its third reading.
House Bill 2021 is a bill to amend and reenact Sections of the Code of Virginia relating to school boards, school-wide events with parents, free or reduced price meal applications. The bill is before the Committee on Education with amendment, nature substitute.
Delegate from Prince William, Delegate Rome.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move the committee substitute as amended.
Shall the committee substitute be agreed to? As many as favor that motion will say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The substitute's agreed to. The delegate from Prince William.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, HB 2021 ensures that at back-to-school nights, parents receive information about and an application for free and reduced price meals, and that at parent-teacher conferences, schools are encouraged to also supply that same information, though they are not mandated to in that case. And, Mr. Speaker, I hope it is the will of the body to engross the bill and pass it along to its third reading.
You're on the next one. Sorry. Shall the bill be engrossed and passed to its third reading? As many as favor that motion say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The bill is engrossed and passed to its third reading.
Continuing with the second reading regular calendar, bottom of page 35. Next up, Delegate Bourne's House Bill 2110 seeks to amend and reenact two sections of the Code of Virginia relating to delinquent tax lands. Bills Board Committee on Finance with an amendment nature as substitute.
Delegate from Richmond City, Delegate Bourne.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move the committee substitute.
Shall the committee substitute be agreed to? All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The substitute is agreed to. The delegate
Thank
from
you,
Richmond City.
Mr. Speaker. The substitute for 2110 simply extends the period for which an installment program or installment arrangement can be had when a homeowner has fallen behind on their property taxes. Current law sets it at 60 months. This bill seeks to extend it to 72 months, therefore adding another tool in our toolbox to help homeowners stay in their homes and pay their back taxes. I hope it be the will of the body to engross the bill and pass it on to its third reading.
Shall the bill be engrossed and passed to its third reading? As many as favor that motion say aye. Those opposed, no. The bill is engrossed and passed to its third reading.
Continuing second reading regular calendar, top of page 36, House Bill 2151. It seeks to amend and reenact two sections of the Code of Virginia relating to state parks, master planning requirements, Bills Board Committee on Agriculture, Chesapeake, and Natural Resources.
The delegate from Campbell, Delegate Ferris.
Mr. Speaker, House Bill 2151 does just like the clerk said, and it moves from $500,000 to $2 million, the amount of money that they can spend at a state park, whether it be to buy land or to buy yurts. And you and I ought to go spend some time in a yurt.
Not together. There's not room in a yurt for both of us.
We'd understand they need more money to build something for us to stay in.
Yes, sir.
But before a master plan has to be done, every 10 years the state parks make a master plan. It describes and leaves in detail what they plan to do with that state park. And now if they spend $500,000, they have to redo that master plan. This will just move this to $2 million. I hope it'll be the pleasure of the body to move it to a third reading.
Shall the bill be engrossed and passed to its third reading? As many as favor that motion will say aye. Those opposed, no. The bill is engrossed and passed to its third reading.
House Bill 2264 is by for the day. Therefore, next bill, top of page 37, printed calendar. House Bill 2334 is before the body. It seeks to amend and reenact sections of the Code of Virginia relating to sales and use tax, exemption for oil and gas drilling equipment. The Bills report to Committee on Finance.
The delegate from Tazewell, Delegate Moorfield.
Mr. Speaker, members of the House, House Bill 2334 would extend the sunset date for the exemption of sales and use tax on equipment, supplies, and materials used in drilling for oil and natural gas. And in an effort to preserve the environment, the bill also includes sales and retail tax exemption for equipment used in reclamation. Move to engross the bill.
Shall the bill be engrossed and passed to its third reading? As many as favor that motion will say aye. Those opposed, no. The bill is engrossed and passed to its third reading.
House Bill 2405 seeks to amend and reenact sections of the Code of Virginia relating to high school graduation requirements, passing score on select questions from the U.S. naturalization test. The bill was Board Committee on Education with amendments.
The delegate from Powhatan, Delegate Ware.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the committee amendments.
Shall the committee amendments be agreed to? All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The amendments are agreed to. The delegate from Powhatan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What House Bill 2405 would require is that the State Board of Education, in establishing high school graduation requirements, require that each high school student take and correctly answer 70% of somewhere between 50 or 60 questions from the United States naturalization test. When we think of the fundamental reasons why we have public schools, I can't think of many things more fundamental than this. And what we're asking here is that our high school students meet the same standard that we appropriately require for those seeking American citizenship. I hope it'll be the pleasure of the House to engross the bill and carry it to its third reading.
Shall the bill be engrossed and passed to its third reading? As many as favor that motion say aye. Those opposed, no. The bill is engrossed and passed to its third reading.
Mr. Speaker, penultimately, returning to page 25, we're on House Bill 2362 by Delegate Wiley. It seeks to amend the Code of Virginia relating to burial fees for military spouses. Bill is reported from the Committee on Appropriations with amendment nature as substitute.
The delegate from Winchester, Delegate Wiley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the committee substitute.
Shall the committee substitute be agreed to? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The substitute's agreed to. The delegate from Winchester.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. HB 2362 provides that from such funds as may be appropriated, the Commonwealth shall pay the burial fees for any spouse or surviving spouse of an active duty member or veteran of the United States Armed Forces buried at a veterans cemetery operated by the Department of Veterans Services. I hope it is the will of the body to engross this bill and move it to its third reading.
Shall the bill be engrossed and passed to its third reading? As many as favor that motion will say aye. Those opposed, no. The bill is engrossed and passed to its third reading.
And, Mr. Speaker, last but not least, on page 30 of the printed calendar is House Bill 2354, which had gone by temporarily. HB 2354 seeks to amend and reenact sections of the Code of Virginia relating to healthcare provider panels, continuity of care. The bill is reported to the Committee on Commerce and Energy with the substitute. Mr. Speaker, that substitute has been adopted previously. Delegate Orog has floor amendments. They have been updated correctly, and they are now before the body.
The delegate from Spotsylvania, Delegate Orog.
Mr. Speaker, I move the adoption of the floor amendment.
The now corrected floor amendment. Shall the floor amendment be agreed to? As many as favor that motion will say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The floor amendment is adopted. The delegate from Spotsylvania.
Mr. Speaker, fellow delegates, it's kind of an unusual day on the floor here when I have the gentlelady from Fairfax stand and speak mostly positive about a bill earlier I had, and then the delegate from Fairfax to correct a parliamentary omission I had. But that being said, I'm glad they did, because I'd rather have it fixed here than over on the other side. Mr. Speaker, many members of the House, this is a very significant bill that will impact all of our citizenry when they have that circumstance where their insurance carrier and the local health provider are at odds and the contract is terminated. Current practice, notification is frequently given by both the healthcare provider, the hospitals, and the insurance company. This will clarify the insurance company sends the notice. It's less confusing. But the most significant change will be that now once that notice is given, the patient will continue to be provided medical care within those medical facilities for 90 days after the termination was noticed. If they have a life-threatening condition, their treatment can continue for 180 days. And with the adoption of the floor amendments, if they're in a healthcare facility, whether it be a hospital or a nursing home, their treatment will continue until they are discharged. It's a significant improvement for our patients. It gives them longer time of surety for patient care and longer time to find an alternative healthcare provider or insurance carrier, as the case may be. I'll ask that the bill be engrossed and passed to its third reading.
Shall the bill be engrossed and passed to its third reading? As many as favor that motion will say aye. Those opposed, no. The bill is engrossed and passed to its third reading.
Mr. Speaker, that completes that section of the calendar. The last two portions of today's active calendar, page 38 of the printed calendar, category of memorial resolutions laid on the Speaker's table. The memorial resolutions to be adopted in block are listed on pages 38 and 39 with the exception of House Joint Resolution 583, which has been removed from the block and taken by for the day.
Does any member desire to remove any other resolutions from the block? Hearing none. All those in favor of adopting en bloc the memorial resolutions laid on the Speaker's table as listed on pages 38 through 39 of the printed calendar, with the exception of those listed by the clerk, shall please rise. The resolutions are adopted.
Finally, Mr. Speaker, commending resolutions laid on the Speaker's table. The commending resolutions to be adopted in block are listed on pages 40 through 43 of today's printed calendar, with the exception of House Resolution number 270, which has been removed from the block and has already been taken up out of order and passed.
Does any member desire to remove a resolution from the block? Hearing none. All those in favor of adopting the commending resolutions laid on the Speaker's table on pages 40 through 43 of the printed calendar, with the exception of those listed by the clerk, will say aye. Those opposed, no. The resolutions are adopted.
Mr. Speaker, that completes today's calendar.
Pursuant to House Rule 51, the House is returned to the morning hour. Does the clerk have any additional announcements or communication?
Simple one communication, Mr. Speaker, addressed today, January 30th, to the Clerk of the House of Delegates. From the Speaker, I've made the following committee assignments and changes effective today. Delegate Bagby has been removed from the Committee on Rules, and Delegate Scott of Portsmouth appointed to the Committee on Rules. Sincerely, C. Todd Gilbert, Speaker. Mr. Speaker, after that, just looking ahead to today's calendar of meeting events, meetings, excuse me. The appropriations is stacked. First up is going to be Appropriations Higher Education Subcommittee. They'll meet immediately upon adjournment of the House in the shared committee room on the ground floor of the Pocahontas building. Once that subcommittee is finished, then the Transportation and Public Safety Subcommittee will be meeting of approps in the same room. And then once those two subcommittees have gone through their docket, the full committee on appropriations will take up and work its will. That is all in the shared committee room. Courts of Justice full committee has been canceled, but the two subcommittees will be meeting a half hour after adjournment. Court Sub 1 will be in House Room 3 down in the extension at the Capitol, and Court Sub 2 will be here in House Room 1 of the Capitol proper. Committee on Finance meeting has been canceled. Full finance has been canceled. However, Finance Subcommittee number 3 will be meeting one half hour after adjournment of the House. So Finance Sub 3, they'll be in the House Committee room, the ground floor of Pocahontas, a half hour after adjournment, approximately 2:15-ish. At 2:30, the Virginia Latino Caucus will be meeting in the 200A subcommittee room over in Pocahontas. Virginia Latino Caucus at 2:30. At 4 o'clock, the Technology and Innovation Caucus will be meeting. They'll be in the 300A subcommittee room on the third floor of Pocahontas. And the last legislative meeting for this afternoon I'm aware of, sir, is the Agriculture, Chesapeake, and Natural Resources Chesapeake Subcommittee. They're meeting at 4 o'clock in House Room 2 here in the Capitol downstairs on the floor. Looking ahead to tomorrow, last day of January 31st, the Conservative Caucus will be meeting at 7 a.m. bright and early in the 300B Subcommittee room on the third floor of Pocahontas. Also at 7 o'clock, P&E Subcommittee number 1 will be meeting House Room 2 here in the Capitol. Privileges and Elections Sub 1 will be meeting 7 o'clock, House Room 2. Committee on Education's K-12 Subcommittee meeting is canceled. Looking at 7:30, Health, Welfare, and Institutions Subcommittee number 1. They'll be meeting in the House Committee room, the ground floor of Pocahontas, HWI Sub 1. At 8 o'clock, the Committee on Transportation Subcommittee number 1 dealing with DMV issues. They'll be meeting at 8 a.m. tomorrow in the House Room 3 down at the extension. 9 o'clock, the full committee on transportation, once the subcommittee number 1's finished, they'll be meeting at 9 in House Room 3. At 9:30, Committee on Health, Welfare, and Institutions is meeting. This is a time change for HWI, 9:30, House Committee Room on the ground floor. And, Mr. Speaker, that looks like the last of the legislative business I'm aware of, so therefore the Democratic Caucus will meet at 11 o'clock in House Room 2 here in the Capitol, and Republicans at 11:15 at House Room 1 here in the Capitol. That's all the announcement I have at this time, sir.
The delegate from Scott, Delegate Kilgore.
Mr. Speaker, I move that when the House adjourns today, adjourn to reconvene tomorrow at 12 noon.
The delegate from Scott, Delegate Kilgore, moves that when the House adjourns today, it adjourn to reconvene tomorrow at 12 noon. As many as favor that motion will say aye. Those opposed, no. The motion is agreed to. The delegate from Scott, Delegate Kilgore.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House do now adjourn.
The delegate from Scott, Delegate Kilgore, moves that the House do now adjourn. As many as favor that motion will say aye. Those opposed, no. The motion is agreed to. The House stands adjourned until tomorrow at 12 noon.